Welcome to Belief, Being, and Beyond with your host, Granddaughter Crow.
So I have been looking forward to having you on my show for so long, and finally you're here, and I
Yay!
feel like a little fangirl. I'm just
Oh,
like, so I'm really excited to have you, Lilith. It's so great to see you.
oh, thank you. It's great to be on your show. Like, I'm a fan of yours as well, so we can have a mutual fan club.
Fangirls of fangirls. I love it.
Yeah,
Hi,
yeah.
everybody. Granddaughter Crow here for another episode of Belief, Being, and Beyond. And I went to New Orleans and got you a really special Beyond. This time we're talking with Lilith Dorsey. Given name Lilith Dorsey. Say hi to everyone, Lilith.
Hi, how's everybody doing?
I love it. I love it. So let me give you a little quick intro about, and I'm going to say quick intro about Lilith because they do so many things. So Lilith Dorsey has an MA and also hails from many magical traditions, which is going to be so great and rich in this conversation, to include Afro-Caribbean, Celtic, and Indigenous American spirituality, yo. Also, their traditional education focus on plant science and anthropology. I love that, anthropology and films at the University of Rhode Island, New York University, and the University of London. Also a voodoo priestess and just so much more. Filmmaker, co-host of the pop culture, and now we are here to talk a little bit and get to know Lilith a little bit deeper, but also we're really going to highlight her latest book, which is one of, I think, like six or seven that she has written. The list goes on, and I'll definitely put it in the comments and everything so people can get to know you. And if you're interested, easy www.lilithdorsey.com to find out. I mean, you're a mouthful.
No wonder I'm tired, right? That's what I heard somebody say. Yeah,
Wonder I'm tired. When I
yeah.
listen to my bio, I understand.
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's a lot. But thank you so much for having me on the show. This is great.
Oh, I love it. I remember, I'll just pretend that it's the first time I met you. We were at a conference, I think in 2022, and it was the INANCE conference. And just we ran into each other, and I'm like, I know you. I was like, I know you. And now I'm just like, how do I know you? And I'm just like, there must be some sort of a synergetic, earth magic based, like you also, oh my goodness, wrote Water Magic, which was a part of a Llewellyn magical elements series with, earth magic. I just had Dodie with,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, on the show. And she mentioned, oh, and Lilith wrote, I was just like, I'm having Lilith on the show. And I love it. I absolutely love it. We have a lot of people in common. I love
Hmm.
Dawn the Kitchen Witch, Kachina Aurora, Yo, shout out to
Yes.
Aurora, Alaric Albertson,
Yes. Hmm.
and his new book. And now you have this book that just released. We're recording the last day of June 2024. So it just released in June. I think it's releasing in
Yes.
July in the UK and Canada.
No, technically it releases in the US on the 8th, but like people are starting to get their copies, so they had to push it back a little bit. But this is the first interview where I actually have it in my hands. So this is great. Yay!
So
Yay!
I know I am just like, yeah, amazed. So this one is called Tarot Every Witch Way, Witch. Love the title. I mean, what are you, a slam poet or something? This is
I
amazing,
am actually. That you left that off my bio, but yeah.
right? No wonder why you're tired. I love this. one of the things that I love about this, like you give a chapter on each of the major arcana, you give a chapter on the lower suits, the swords, the coins, all of that. And then you talk more and more. So we'll dig in slowly. But what I love about this book is when I'm looking at it, I'm like, wait a second, this isn't just a book. Wait, this is a recipe. No, no, it's not a recipe. Oh, I know, it's an encyclopedia. That's what it is. And I'm like, oh yeah, I mean, people, you need to get a copy for your library, for your witchy room, or wherever, that is where you're practicing doing divination, and for your kitchen, so that, and for your garden. I mean, I'm almost running over myself. So basically, tarot every which way. It's amazing. So I'll slow my roll just a little bit because I'm way too excited. But tell us a little bit about what inspired this book. And you have so much in it. So with the chapters, each of them giving like gems and crystals and animal associations to each of the cards, and some cardinal directions, some musical notes, all of this, and recipes and meditations. How did you come about this concept? Because I'm like, oh, this is the one that you need, people. You need. So how did you?
Yeah, I mean, I've been reading for, wow, like 35 years professionally now. That says how old I am, but a very long time. And probably about 30 years ago, I was doing a reading for a woman who had a son that was a teenager and he was special needs and he couldn't communicate. And she was having a lot of trouble because he was, fighting back with her and almost on the border of violent and things like that. And she was really sad. And I was thinking, all right, I had done the reading and this is what the cards are, but how can she put that into action with somebody that's nonverbal, with somebody that has a lot of challenging issues? So I thought, well, wait a minute, she could cook him a recipe and they could share that together, or she could get the aromatherapy scent for it, or she could plant those flowers or herbs in the garden and sit with him and try and connect with him that way. So it really sort of took it from me from just having, oh, here's a flat meaning on the card and there's maybe 10 or 12 different words of what it could mean, which that's in the book too. But then there's so much more. There's so many other ways, As you said, if you're a kitchen witch, you might want to make a recipe. If you're a green witch, you might want to go out in the garden and plant some of these things to take back in and put on your tarot altar, or share with your ancestors, or share with your coven members, or just share with your family in that way, because you want to sort of expand. So for me, it was both a way of explaining the cards and also a practical action way that you could interact with the cards and use them to best serve you and what it is you're trying to accomplish.
I love that because it really, I mean, on belief, being, and beyond, the concept is the belief system that one holds constitutes their behavior and their beingness in the world, and that there's always something beyond. And in this, I love having people, I only have people on the show that actually implement their belief system in their daily life in a practical manner. And you take it from the level of, let's read the cards for divination purposes, question, answer. And you're like, let's work with the cards. I used to teach a tarot class, and sometimes I still do. And now I have a workbook for it. But one of the things is that I used to tell people, step into the cards, step into the cards. And I think that might not have been a full enough explanation, because people are like, what do you mean? I'm like, just step in there and look around. And you're like, oh, Granddaughter Crow, I got this one. And you take us through this guided meditation of actually visualizing, the Fool card, and there's a little dog, and actually taking them through this very visceral understanding, where they can then, just like you said, with a person who doesn't necessarily always enjoy English or speaking and needs another medium, it really kind of is like, oh, this is a visceral, tactical, practical embodiment so that I can actually embody these cards. So thank you for doing.
Yeah. People have called it like a mind palace. So you're stepping into a mind palace for each of the cards, and when I first started formally practicing magic, I mean, my parents named me Lilith, so there was always magic around and magic doing and things like that. But I think I got one of my earliest books on magic when I was maybe 12 or 13. And it was, back in the early 80s, late 70s, it was very hard to get any books on magic, especially if you were a kid. It wasn't like they were at every store in every place. But one of the first books that I got was called Instant ESP, which is a hilarious title. But one of the things it talked about was accessing that meditative state by diving deep into yourself and looking around and seeing what was there. So this was sort of just, and I expanded upon that. Obviously, it's a technique a lot of people have used, but I expanded on it for the cards because I think you're right. You do need to literally open the door and step into that card because it's going to be different for everybody. That's why we have so many decks out there. Some cards are going to be, the covers, the Three of Cups from the Tarot of the Vampires. Some people are going to see the Three of Cups as Dracula's brides floating above the city.
Right.
Some of them are just going to see Three Cups or the traditional kind of deck where it's three women in long flowing robes dancing around. But it's going to be different for everybody. So you need to explore what it is for you and what your self-conscious is really telling you about that card.
I love that. And the thing that I noticed when I'm looking over your body of work and like in the beginning with your bio about, you have like some voodoo and you have like Celtic and you have some indigenous and the list goes on and on. And then I'm like, no wonder you were the perfect person to write this book because you don't, I mean, although you may lean into one practice more than another, you actually do, you were raised with the understandings from different positionings. Can you talk to us a little bit about being raised from different positionings and how that actually led into this montage of stepping into the cards and these little palettes and all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it was just a combination of all the different ancestors that I have. I have Black ancestors, I have Indigenous ancestors, I have Celtic ancestors. And so for me, that was just a way of connecting with those people that were responsible for me being here. And they are trying to see me survive and trying to see me thrive. And they've been through a lot. So even when I have a moment and I'm like, oh, this is challenging, I've had a lot of people think I have it easy. I've had a lot of trauma in my life. I've had a lot of difficulties. But, there is some level of when I feel some of these things happening, a lot of my ancestors have been through it. So when I first started formally studying magic from other people, from books, from, everything, that's where I wanted to look. And that's what I wanted to sort of dedicate my practice to, because that's where I come from. And it's funny, a lot of my teachers in the different traditions also came from really mixed backgrounds. Like my Haitian Vodou priestess, she actually was trained at Harvard Divinity and was a UU minister, amazing woman named Bonnie Devlin, who's no longer with us. But she was a master drummer. She used to teach drums to special needs kids, but she was adopted. And she said the only thing she knew about her heritage was that she was Mongolian and Irish. That's what she used to tell me.
There you go.
And she ended up being a voodoo priestess and also a Santera, And I think because of the drum and because music and dance allows us to sort of incorporate some of those different energies into our practice, and my Santo godmother was also adopted. She knew she was Brazilian and Indigenous and Italian. So, and, she ended up with this thing. So it's very interesting to me that both my study and my own heritage reflect that. And that was something that was really important for me to move forward with.
Yeah. And I love this because in tarot every which way, you actually help a lot of people understand the different types of witches. Like maybe, you are a green witch, or maybe you're a kitchen witch, and give a little explanation around that. And I think that that's vitally important, because a lot of people will go into a metaphysical shop, bump into maybe a tarot reader, get interested, buy their own tarot cards, and maybe don't even know what type of a coven to find or what type of a witch they are. So, to add to the list, is it a recipe book? Is it an encyclopedia? Is it a workbook? I'm like, no, it's a self-discovery witch book, and I think that you're the perfect person to be able to talk to these different types of perspectives of witches, because you come from different perspectives and backgrounds of traditions.
And the reason I wrote about all those different types of witches, I think we didn't think about it that way, 25, 30 years ago. But now, especially with younger generations, there's this real kind of need, I think, to find your tribe and to find other people who associate with things and who worship in these types of ways. So again, I mean, you can be one, you can be all of them, and I say that in the book. You can be a little of one and all of the other. It's not about just picking one, but it's
Yeah.
about understanding yourself. It's about understanding how your brain works and what you like to do, and then bringing that to your magical practice and your tarot practice and every other practice you have. So that way it's all integrated and you can work it together.
Yeah, and finding your own authenticity within your spiritual practice. If you want to even identify as a witch, maybe you want to be a shaman, maybe you want to call yourself a mystic, maybe you want to be, there's so many different things. So find your comfortable self. And this is a great book to pick up. Another good thing, I want to talk about this, which I found so endearing and so a little like, I don't know, just real with my indigenous nature, and knowing hoodoo practitioners and voodoo practitioners, and just that working with that raw stuff. You literally have something about not only pick your deck, but birth and feed your deck. Like, we're
Yes.
talking that the decks are alive, and we're
Yes.
opening the mind to go, my deck has a personality and I want to get to know it. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I love the way that you said that.
Yeah, it's always been very important to me. I'm part of the Voodoo Spiritual Temple here in New Orleans, which when I joined, Louis Martinet was an active member. He's still a member. He just moved away, so he only comes back sometimes these days. But he's the co-author of the New Orleans Voodoo Tarot. And in there, he talked about, you know, giving it a meal and feeding it and taking a piece of your hair and sort of consecrating it that way. So you have the sacred energy for the deck. So that way, if you need to replace it, you can replace it. And it's really like waking it up and bringing it into the world so you can work with it, And when I heard that, I thought it was wonderful. And again, I've been reading just for myself for probably 45 years, really, at this point. So I've been doing that ever since I heard it, and I've sort of expanded on it. I also say, put it under your pillow and take a nap, see what kind of dreams you have when you have that there. And so it's about getting close to it, understanding it, knowing it on a deep level, so it will help unlock the secrets you're trying to find.
I absolutely love that, because in my shamanic practice, I come from the position of animism, where everything has a soul, everything has a consciousness, to include even my house. So, like, if I'm going to have a glass of wine, I'll pour the house a glass of wine, the spirits of the house a glass of wine. And, on the full moon, give the house a little dish of chocolate, and or whatever I'm eating. And now you've expanded that practice as far as, Granddaughter Crow and her little
Beautiful.
cards that I have in here,
Beautiful.
and actually giving thanks and grace to each of them. Usually I hear people talk about, like, oh, well, charge the cards or this and that. And that seems like, yes, and I do that, leave it in the windowsill on a full moon or whatnot. But I love the idea of actually going, hi, buddy, come to the table. Here, let me give you, let me feed you, let me connect with you, let you connect with me. It's just brilliant. It's just so much more, I don't know, I think
Yeah.
it's cool.
It is, it is. I mean, Ashe is a big thing in African traditional
Right.
religions, and that's our word for sacred energy of things. So you're right, it is very an animistic belief where even things that we think are not alive, they are alive in a way and have that sacred energy, and we have to honor that, and we have to learn how to work with it. I'm not against charging my deck either, but that to me seems a little one-sided. Whereas if I make a meal and I sit down and I share it with the deck,
Yeah.
then we're talking about a partnership and a connection, and not me telling it what to do, but us sharing information and energy so that everything can go as well as possible.
I love that because I like that you said that it's one-sided because and I still will charge cards, nothing against that, but it's almost like going, okay, you need to cleanse and align with me, sit in the moonlight, instead of going, I want to build a relationship with you. You talk about like maybe you're asking the cards too many questions. Maybe, I mean, you're really throwing it down because you
Yeah.
get people. And when I was first playing with
Mhm.
the major cards that I use aren't necessarily tarot, they're the animal oracle cards and things like that. And I remember when I was first doing this in my first tarot deck, I think it was, the Rider-Waite-Smith or O'Connelly, the Connolly deck, and I'd be like, does he love me? Will I get this job every day? And after a while, I would pull the same cards, but then they started showing up reverse. And I got this feeling like, I told you already. Why you keep asking, you kid? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are you there yet? So
Yeah.
I love that you put that in there. Can you talk a little bit more about sometimes the cards are like, okay, Mr. or Mrs. Insecure, chill
Yep.
out. We got this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's a concept that's definitely been in place for a long time. Crowley talks about there being certain cards, namely swords cards, where once you get it, that this is time to just sort of take a break and move away from it right now, and I think that that's important because, again, if it's a relationship, and you ask your parent, you ask your partner, you ask whoever's driving you, are we there yet 500 times, they're going to lean over and throat punch you, or something that's nicer but still the same effect. Yeah.
Exactly.
So they need to have something that allows them to take a break or allows them to wait. And the more I do readings, and I'm sure this is true for you or anybody else who's been reading for a long time, the more you see that there are some things that there just isn't a simple yes, no about at that moment. So sometimes waiting is a good thing. Sometimes waiting means that whatever other 500 things have to happen in order for the thing you're hoping for to happen haven't happened yet. So that's sort of like a butterfly effect, right? Like that was such a great movie because there's so many teeny things. The wing of a butterfly can change the whole world. So there's so many teeny things that have to happen in order for what you're looking for to manifest. So you might not know whether or not that it's going to happen because the universe doesn't know whether or not that's going to happen.
Agreed. And just moreover, and I love this part of the conversation too, is that sometimes when people come to me and they ask questions, spirit will just kind of give me this. If I give you an answer and you tell it to them, it's going to change the course. Does that ever happen to you where it's like, sorry, you're not allowed to know that yet? And they're like, well, just
Yeah.
tell me. And I'm like, I'm not allowed to know that yet. Spirit says that if you know that, it'll change the course, just like the butterfly effect. What's your experience with that? What do you think about that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, right when I was really young, probably like 22 or something like that. And I was reading for a friend of mine. And it was every bad card that you could get in a deck. And not that I think there are good and bad cards, but there are more challenging cards. And I think this was the first time this person had ever got their cards read. It was actually a cute door-to-door salesman who'd come to my house who was
Too.
here from London and trying to sell crappy books door to door. And I had given a reading to him, and because it was so negative, the way the cards were pointing was that something was going to happen, possibly with some of the older members of his family, his grandmother or something, but there was going to be something that was really intense and difficult happening. And it ended up that the next day he was in a horrible car accident, jaws of life, broke every bone in his body, the whole thing. He's fine now. He was fine eventually. But I really feel like the reason that we ended up just seeing that there was going to be extreme difficulty and not exactly what was going to happen was he couldn't handle it, or there was nothing we could do to change it, and it was going to be okay in the end. So now what I usually do before I even do the reading, when somebody books the reading, almost, I take the cards and I have a little conversation with them about, we're only going to show what needs to be shown right now. So if there's something that they need to see, then it'll tell them. If there's something that if they knew it, it would change the course, then they don't need to know that. What do they need to know from this reading? And sometimes that's not, does he love me?
I know, exactly.
And sometimes, does he love me? I don't know if I put this in the book or not, but I remember doing a reading for a friend of mine who was doing that, like, does he love me? And it came out that the person did love her and they were going to propose to her the next day. And they did propose to her the next day, but then they ended up leaving her a day after that and getting engaged to somebody they just met that worked at the Apple store. So
Yeah, be careful what you ask for, people.
just because they love you today doesn't mean they won't love you tomorrow. It doesn't mean they won't leave you tomorrow. Like that's really not necessarily what you need to know right now.
Right. I love that you said that, and that you do that practice of, talking to the cards about, what I say when I give a read. I say a prayer, I set sacred space, I set my ego out, and I open up to the divine as it reveals itself to them, because the divine reveals itself to each of us in our own profound way, wherever we're at in our path. But then I say, to provide you, and I'm putting myself in the position of a conduit, to provide you with whatever information is going to best suit you for strength, healing, purpose, whatever's going to be the most beneficial to you today. Because if you come and see me tomorrow, things change. And so I do the same thing. So see, we are sisters.
Yeah, see?
I love that. So if you're enjoying the Belief, Being, and Beyond podcast and would like to support it, I'm on Patreon. Just go to Patreon, Granddaughter Crow, or you can find it at granddaughtercrow.com. Thank you so much. So how does it feel as an author? And I know that you are a creator of films and dance and now poetry. We know that now. And an author. Does it ever get like this, oh yeah, there's my another book? Or do you go, this my baby, I birthed it and I give it to the world? I mean, how do you process through that?
No, it's always just like a baby, you know what I mean? And I said that to people who haven't had children and they give me a look like, what? And I'm like, okay, well, maybe someday you'll have children and then you'll understand, but it takes so long to get from, the time you find out there's going to be a baby to when it actually comes out, and there's so many days and there's so many growing pains. There's, both my girls, I was nauseous every day, so it really is like this kind of shamanic puke where you're, getting rid of everything and it has to come out and it hurts and you don't want to do it, and then there's something wonderful and beautiful at the end. And then you have to, watch it grow up and you have
It's tarot every which way, WITCH, unlock the power of the cards for spellcrafting and magic. I honestly have been looking forward to getting this book, and I had to wait for it. Gosh, I didn't wait as long as you, of course. I just had to wait a week or two. And then finally got you on the podcast. But I want to kind of just slow down for another second and let people know, Lilith is brilliant, has been practicing for a very long time, looks at the world through a variety of different lenses, even with her spell working, her magical practices, and actually sees the need so that the next millennials and Gen X and go on and on and on, because this book is going to live forever, is that here now we're going to start defining, what kind of a witch am I? I'm kind of a green witch, I would say. I identify with the wisdom of the natural world, and all of that. But I love seeing that, and I love having that inspiration on this podcast, because this podcast really is about, one of the aspects of it is, so you've been going to a metaphysical store now for long enough that you shouldn't have these questions about how many cards are in the tarot, and is it the major arcana or how do you say it? What kind of a witch? There's a lot of questions, or I'm afraid to ask about voodoo. I'm afraid to ask about hoodoo. What if I insult? What if all of those questions? That's what I love to do in this podcast, is to kind of be that, open it up so that people can engage with a plethora of different spiritual practices. And you're the perfect guest because you also engage in a plethora of different practices. So that's not a question, but you guys have to check out www.lilithdorsey.com. So much on the website, so many things. I do want to talk a little about, I always found Louisiana, New Orleans, as a very mystical, animistic biosphere in and of itself, to the point where I'm so intrigued, yet respectful enough to go, maybe I'll just wait. Like, could you share a little bit about how it's living in, New
Don't
Orleans?
come now. It's 110 degrees with the heat index, and it's hurricane season, so don't come now.
That's why I was afraid.
It's a lot. It's a lot. But I think it's always been a magical city because it is below sea level. I spent the day, actually. I have a community garden here, and it's called Bulbancha Blooms Community Garden. And since I'm on your show, I'll say this. Bulbancha was the original Choctaw name for the area, and that means land of many tongues. So there were always a whole bunch of different tribal people coming through here. There were always a bunch of different cultures mixing together. I call it a spiritual gumbo. So there's a level of respect and appreciation as opposed to appropriation, and just an open-minded attitude that we don't really see in other places. And that's what's so special to me. I don't know if that's an answer to your question, but that's
that is exact. Yeah, that's it. And I think that you touch on a really good point that, we're now trying to understand how to, appreciate versus appropriate. And we're still figuring out what is the correct way to approach. I get asked as a red body a bunch of questions that I've never been asked before. And yet what I see in that is that I'm starting to develop my own understanding, and the next generation will develop more, just like you did with the defining the witches, and that this is a dialogue of conversation that comes to the table. And I love that you have that as, the community garden, because that's the earth-based, let this plant talk to this plant, let them be in the same place and bearing different fruits, and not making fun of each other, not judging each other, but let the carrot be the carrot, people. Let the corn be the corn, I love that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things too with the book, I spent a long time at being a nanny for my day gig, you know, so I always felt like I had to be able to explain these concepts to somebody who was 2 or 3 years old. So for me, I have to understand it inside out and as simply as possible so that they would get it. And I think that sometimes people look at me and they're like, oh, she's an OG witch. She don't know what's going on. But I feel like I might understand a tiny bit better than other people that are my age because I have always been around young people. Like the people I started, my own daughter's, she's going to get mad at me. She's in her 30s. But from that time up until now, I have been around children who have aged and I've been in their lives. You know, they text me and we talk. Some of them are, you know, getting older and they're the little preteen witches now. And I thank them all in the book. And I at least feel like I understand in part what their perspective is because I love them. I raised them from their babies and I still have them in my lives now. And that's such a blessing, such a blessing.
I come from the same place. My son just turned 33 and gave me 4 beautiful grandchildren.
Oh, beautiful.
And I also, you know, a lot of times I think to myself, I struggled in high school. I guess I had other things going on. If you would look into my life, you'd be like, oh yeah, I know why you struggled, but I still struggled. I thought differently, you know, and all of this. And then thought school and learning isn't for me until I hit, you know, my Saturn return. I'm 30 years old and I'm like, I want to go to college. And I didn't know why I thought that. And I aced it and I went on and on and on and all of that. And what I realized in my process was a pure genius doesn't always use $5, $10 words. A pure genius understands these esoteric concepts that are from the mystery schools and the mystery void and can explain them to a kindergartner. So I write that way too. And that's why I'm just like, oh, this is one that you don't want to put down. I was just like, okay, I read the Fool now. Okay, what? Okay, wait, I want to see the High Priestess. Okay. So thank you so much for writing this book. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about before we sign off or say to the listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the other things that I think is unique about this book is that it has advice from Courtney Alexander, who did the Dust to Onyx Tarot. It has advice from Matt Oren, one of the most famous, popular witchy authors out there. It has advice from Dorothy Morrison, another OG witch, you know, on and on. The forwards by Silver Ravenwolf. I mean, there is so much, you know, witchy spiritual knowledge in this book, not just from me, but from some really amazing, fantastic other authors that also happen to be friends of mine. And that's an honor and a privilege to be able to include this in the book. So I hope everybody likes it. Oh yeah, and wait, the other thing, you can get signed copies on my website, lilithdorsey.com. And if you order a signed copy, I will also send you a sticker and these lovely recipe cards that Llewellyn sent me. So while supplies last, but yes.
Again, www.lilithdorsey.com. Pick up your copy, pick up your signed copy where you get, who doesn't love a sticker? And the recipe cards, come on now. Mic drop.
Yeah.
I mean, over the top now, Lilith, a little over the top. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really enjoyed having you.
Thank you. Thank you. It was an honor and a privilege. And you're one of my favorite people. So this was a great conversation.
You're one of my favorite people too. So awesome. Thank you for tuning in to yet another episode of Belief, Being, and Beyond with your host, Granddaughter Crow. Please like, subscribe, and share with those who you think would actually benefit from this information. Also, definitely check out Lilith Dorsey's book, Tarot Every Which Way. Give her some good ratings, peeps. This one was birthed and it is earned. Absolutely. So thank you. And we will see you on the flippy flip.